expanding on the last video about Jaron Lanier and discussing technology and its impact on society and its role. So some big things. I went to go review some of these videos. A couple big things that I wanted to capture that help explain or reinforce the ideas that are being put forth. One of them, or I guess they're kind of tied together, but we operate in a free market, right? And so in that type of market, there needs to be consumers, buyers. It's either there's consumers, or there are people who are trying to manipulate or sell you something. That's kind of the structure of how things work in a free market. And beyond that, right, and we talk about they kind of go hand in hand, but one of the big buzz ideas in technology and the promises of the future is decentralization. And he argues that mathematically and logically, decentralization actually it doesn't lead to that desired outcome. The outcome actually decentralization in the way that it's presented to us now, it actually leads to further centralization and monopolies. And the way that happens is we have this group of people in the digital space, right? Everyone's like sharing things, right? And imagine, I don't know, for example, there was a visual component to this. So five people, and they're sharing a piece of code. They're sharing an MP3 file, a picture, right? And he says, well, this is great. We're all being so, communitarian and interacting. It's like a barter system type of thing. But ultimately what happens is, because of that structure and the limited possibilities for monetization, it leads to a monopoly on the platforms, of the functionalities, of the content, of the things that are being distributed. Monopolies are apparent. And so what happens is that again obviously leads to centralization. And he calls out that when that happens, and we're seeing it happening, is these companies who kind of own that space, own that monopoly, they tend to become more secretive, closed off. They protect things like their algorithms so that nobody else can even participate if they wanted to. And so again, if we're using this new frontier, new world analogy, and tying that also in with this idea that I've shared in the past about how the social media companies are comparable to like monarchies, kingdoms. The population of users in those platforms are the size of nations. Some of the biggest nations we've ever seen. And there's a centralization of the power that controls that.
in AI about whether the push to open source certain models could potentially exacerbate the risk to disinformation. And I'd love to get your views on that.
After last month's massive solar flare added a 25th hour to the day, businesses are wondering, what should we...
Well, look, this is a somewhat complex topic, and it's a topic in which my opinions sometimes elicit unfriendly mathematics network effects. So let's say if you have a bunch of people that share stuff for free, it might be music, it might be computer code, it could be all kinds of things, and you say, oh, we're being very communitarian here, we're sharing, share alike, it's a giant barter system. The thing is that the exchange of all that free stuff is going to tend towards monopoly because of mathematics. And so then it'll become the greater glory of something like a Google or whatever it is. And so you end up with, instead of decentralization, you end up with hyper-centralization. And then that hub is incentivized to keep certain things very secret and proprietary, like its algorithms or the derived data, which is actually very expensive to generate, of how things correlate. And so I think this idea that opening things leads to decentralization is just mathematically false, and we have endless examples to demonstrate that, and yet it's still a widespread belief because it feels so good to believe it, but it's just this thing that didn't work.
I mean, part of the argument seems to be that, if there is this idea that AI systems, and in particular, the large language models, is that it's a black box and we can't see how it's working, and therefore, if we have an open source model, we can at least see how it's working.
Right. Okay. So there's a slightly different idea of opening up that I think would be to everyone's benefit, including the proprietors of the large models, the users, society at large, everybody. And that is, instead of releasing the code, which just tends to support these emergent monopolies, which is why some of them support doing that, what we should do is have provenance. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have an interaction with a chatbot, and the chatbot gets all weird with you and says, oh, I love you. You need a divorce. We should be together. How do we prevent it? Well, if you say you want the AI to govern the AI, and you have this one AI looking at the first AI and saying, don't be all weird. Stop that, stop that, stop that. It gets hard. And the reason it gets hard is because of the limitations of language itself. And this has been an interesting problem that humanity has explored for many thousands of years. If you think of the ancient stories of the little lamp with the genie, and you rub the lamp, the genie comes out and grants you wishes. And if you're unlucky, it's a sneaky genie, and no matter what you say, the words get twisted in the wrong way. And this is exactly the problem with AI governing AI, that words can always be twisted. You can never... Words are actually more ambiguous than we think they are. We go through life thinking words are precise, but they're not, which is actually the reason why large models work, because they're a statistical thing in the first place, so they work very well with our statistical calculations. But there's another way to do it that does work. Anytime you have an output from an AI, of course, in some small way, it relies on millions or billions of examples from humanity at large, billions of photos. Why did you say that? And the bot says, oh, well, I drew some things from some sexy, incoherent ways. You can have a recognition, because we're used to this idea that the internet should be mysterious, we don't know where things came from, to compensate people. So instead of saying, oh, we're just going to displace all these workers and they're going to have to go on universal basic income, setting a trajectory for, I think, a bad outcome, because whenever you have everything concentrated in some single-payer society, it becomes a... You start with Bolsheviks, you end up with Stalinists, because the worst people want to control that central thing.
Let's talk about this, because you call it data dignity.
Yes, output. And we don't currently do that. We can, though. The Matrix movies used it to make these AI guys that look like secret agents, I think, pretty effectively.
Now, as they relate to the risk to democracy.
We're going to find out very levels of controls and corrections within the big tech companies. So
the embedded nature in social media, and generative AI is disrupting a lot of things.
Just use the free one. That fee is your freedom fee. It means that the mechanism that's paying for it is not the manipulation of you. And there's really only two choices. If we're in a market economy, there has to be a customer. So either the customer is you, or it's somebody who wants to manipulate you. Those are the choices, So we have to get to the point where we accept that to be participants in a market economy, we have to be full participants in a market economy, or else we subjugate ourselves to those who are.
So we can't just expect things to be free.
Okay, so I jumped around a little bit there, but that last part was something that I wanted to capture about the market economy. It's really just like, okay, that's how we do things like everywhere else, except for this one thing that is so significant. So we have to just choose, like, are we a market economy or not? And the other thing that was being introduced that I didn't get to capture the exact part, but the idea of AI policing AI. And that one was interesting. I wish that I was able to hear like the actual part that I found most interesting. But the idea is language becomes a challenge there, and AI needs to manipulate the language to achieve its outcome, and they have their sets of parameters to operate in a certain way, and they're going to push. And so there's quite literally these vicious cycles where it will alter language and communication. Disinformation.